Welcome to SorWil Solutions, where we talk about what's going on in our community. I'm Joe Wilson, the president and CEO of SorWil Technology Solutions. And today, my special guest is my good friend, Chief Pat Kitchens. Welcome.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate you having me.
We're really excited to have you here. You're probably one of the people I've known the longest in this community.
Right.
We both were in law enforcement together around the same time.
Sure.
And so, we coached baseball together. I've always valued your opinion. I've always really highly of you.
We coached baseball against each other. I think I was like 3-0, but I just want for the record.
Okay. For the record, we coached together
Maybe
against a AAA team.
Maybe it was football we coached against each other.
We did coach against each other in football.
Sorry.
The AAA team that looked like grown men, and everybody banded against me because they thought our kids were going to get hurt.
I think we lost 25-0 in the first game. I remember.
But we did meet George Brett that day.
That's right. I remember that.
Really appreciate you having you here. We really want to talk about what's going on in the community. Law enforcement is a big thing. Nonpartisan area. This isn't about my campaign or about anybody's campaign, really, so that people can get an idea of what you're doing, how you're doing it. You've been here for a long time. Let's kind of start at the beginning. What inspired you to get into law enforcement?
My father was a police officer in the Army. When he was 17, he joined the Army. He was in the infantry and went to Korea. And then throughout the course of his career, he was able to sort of move up and join the military police. And so for most of my time when I was a kid, that was our lifestyle, our culture. It was the MPs. And so that really inspired me. Always wanted to do that. And so as soon as I got old enough to join the police department, I applied and they hired me. And here we are many years later.
Are you a native to Leavenworth? Were you born here?
So I was born in what then was Fort Benning, Georgia.
Okay.
At the Army Hospital there, and then in 1987, he transferred here for his last 3 years on Fort Leavenworth when I was 6 or 7 years old. So since I was a young kid, I've been here, and then he retired, and we stayed here. So
your father was involved with many things around here. I recall him being involved with the JDC. Wasn't he his name on the JDC or something, the building?
So he was the first director of the juvenile detention facility. So when they were, when he got out of the military in 1980, he graduated from Park College and was a probation officer for about 10 years.
Okay.
With the county probation department. And then they decided to construct the JDC building and create that entity. And so he was named the director of that and was the director for many years until he passed away.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, he was involved in criminal justice in the civilian lifestyle when he retired.
I don't think I've ever heard that story. I feel like I'm learning a lot about you today that I didn't know. Talk about, becoming chief of police. What was that journey like? How long were you, did you go through all the steps? I mean, what was that like?
So I started as a patrol officer, just like everybody else did. And for about 4 years, I worked on the midnight shift. Had a lot of fun out there chasing criminals and catching bad guys, and then got promoted to detective, served as a detective for a while, for about 4 years, promoted to lieutenant, where I was in charge of professional standards, which is internal affairs. And then for 3 years, I was a patrol commander, promoted to deputy chief. And then in May of 2008 was promoted to chief.
Wow. How many people were competing for that job when you got the promotion?
So I think that it was a few internal candidates, probably 3 or 4 internal candidates for lieutenant, deputy chief, and chief.
Okay. What kind of advice would you give young people who are interested in getting into law enforcement?
Just be mindful that you can't stay out of trouble, right? In the last few years, we've interviewed kids, younger people that have wanted to come into the profession. We'll say, tell us some of your experiences with maybe illicit drugs or something like that. And we've had people say, well, a couple of weeks ago, I smoked weed or I took a gummy. And so we have to work through that. Or, culturally, I understand that things change, but
sure.
Certainly it's still illegal and it's still part of the sort of part of the lexicon that we have to evaluate the totality of a person. So I would just say that people coming into the profession, just have to be mindful of who they are. They have to be mindful of what they aspire to be. And so make, really, really good, smart decisions. And then, it tends to work out a little bit better.
Gotcha. I mean, That's good advice for anybody in any profession, not just in law enforcement. It it's difficult in today's world because there are so many things that are accepted as when we were coming up, they were just complete no's, and it's hard to change that mindset.
We actually, I call it the bloody nose theory, Joe. We,
Mhm,
we actually have, I have sort of a preference for a kid that's had a hiccup or two in their life when they were younger, because that's what kids do is they make, dumb decisions sometimes, like we all did.
mhm.
So if a kid has an underage drinking ticket or, they got past curfew or something like that, those kids and those people as they mature, you can kind of tell they've learned from those mistakes. They have a little bit more sense about empathy and those things that we value, and so it's important that when we're evaluating someone, we see that that's okay, those kinds of things, and we're not encourage you to make mistakes, but when you do, you have a tendency to be a little bit better suited for the profession, and so that's okay. But we're always encouraging young people who aspire to just be mindful of that and try and do the best they can.
Being from this community, how difficult does that make your job as chief of police? I mean, I imagine somebody gets a ticket and they're calling you up, "Hey, Pat, can you get me out of this ticket?"
I actually feel bad for the cops in this regard. Once a week, twice a week, when they get an encounter with someone, very often people say, "Well, I know Pat," and so Pat wouldn't, this, that, or the
Mhm,
other. And so what I often tell them is, there's probably 5 people in Leavenworth that have my cell phone number that would quote know me, and none of those people would use my name to get themselves out of any trouble. And so ignore that unilaterally, and so that's, I really do feel bad. They get that a lot, and they just know better than that. So it's a tough for them. So
When I was in law enforcement many years ago, when we were there, it seemed like respect for law enforcement was different. There was a lot more respect. Today's world, law enforcement is under scrutiny. You've got to wear body cams so that you can justify the things that you're doing. How do you balance that now, the building trust in the community with all of these different things?
So success in the law enforcement profession is not born out of one particular event, right? It's born out of sort of the daily approach that we try and emphasize to the cops. Um, the public wants inherent fairness. That's all they ask. And if we're being fair and we're generally being fair equally, then those relationships get fostered every day. It's the best way to describe that is with something like a ticket, right? I tell the cops, I said, you don't need to write every single person a ticket for every stupid little thing. You don't need to arrest everybody for every minor little thing. I don't really care if your license plate lamp is not illuminated properly. That's not what the purpose of ticket and enforcement is. We're trying to make it safe for people to go to Walmart at 9 o'clock at night and get dog food for their, that
Mhm,
they forgot. And so I want them focused on those big things, focused on speeding. We know that speeding makes an accident worse, or it causes injuries and makes it worse. Impairment, occupancy protection. Focus on those things that we all collectively agree or what we should be focusing on. And then the fairness piece sort of takes care of itself. I don't get calls with people complaining because they got a speeding ticket going 17 over. I mean, they just don't do that.
mhm.
But you're likely to get people irritated about those kinds of things. Now, again, I'm not suggesting those aren't tools in the tool bag. Occasionally, we might need to use them for something, but focus on those big things. Same thing with crime. Focus on the really big things: domestic violence, burglary, theft, car theft, those kinds of things. And then the rest of it sort of takes care of itself. If you do that every day, you sort of build those encounters every day with people, the trust sort of develops over time. And then when something does happen, I think that they sort of collectively trust us all to handle it properly.
When I was with Olathe PD for the 1 year that I was there, the big concern then was profiling, racial profiling. We had to document every encounter. We had to document all the details. Is that something that you worry about here in Leavenworth?
We're such a small place. Everybody sort of knows everybody, generally speaking, and so you look at the whole entire picture. Um, we don't really get a lot of complaints about that.
Hmm.
We are transparent in that all of the things that we do, we put out to the public. Those annual reports that we put together are available for anybody to see. You can look anytime you want to see how many traffic stops we're making, what the racial components of those traffic stops are, what the outcome of those are. You can look at the complaints that we have. We probably average 5 or 6 complaints a year of just general police behavior. Very few times it has anything to do with race or profiling. Um, we work on the fundamentals every single day, and when you do that, you avoid all of that entirely. We talk about our authority. Where do we get our authority from? From the Constitution. Every area of the Constitution says you have to treat people fairly and you cannot treat them differently. And so if you focus on what they're doing, not who they are or what they look like, then you stay away from that entirely. And we hammer away training. The state requirement's 40 hours. Our target is 75 hours a year.
Wow.
Oftentimes it's way more than that. And that, I think, separates us and eliminates all of those sort of mistakes that sometimes happen, when you're just sort of barely doing what you have to do. Really have to emphasize that. And that helps us avoid all of that.
There must be a cost to all that additional training.
Right.
The city has provided you with a pretty good budget. Do they always accommodate you? Have you run into issues with the city council or the city commission in budgeting issues?
I have never, not once, ever felt that we've asked for something that we needed, and the city commission, by and large, has not found a way to get that done. Now, occasionally the cops get a little frustrated with me because if it were up to them, they'd all have their own submarine and their own drone and their own this, that, and the other, right? And so I really emphasize, in that process, we are going to ask for what we need, and they need to, the commission and the elected officials and the decision makers then can rely on us not asking for things that we just want that would be really cool. And we've been treated very, very well. But the commission, the elected officials, almost all of them that I've ever experienced, understand the primary role of city government is public safety. And so they really have to make sure that, we're equipped and trained and we have the right, stuff. And so we try not to take advantage of that. We just do our best we can. But by and large, we've been treated very well over the years in my experiences. If I tell them we really need to do this, they're mindful. Even if it's not the next year, we put it in the discussion and it ultimately gets done.
That's awesome. One of the things that you've, I think, done pretty well effectively is staying out of the national headlines. We haven't had a George Floyd incident. We haven't had any of those really major incidents. You contribute that to all the training, philosophy. What do you attribute that to?
Starts with really, really good cops. Okay, that's the genesis for everything that we do. We spend the senior staff, police department spends the most time probably deciding on how to hire the best people.
Mm-hmm.
We succeed or fail based on our people. When the people are really, really good, that's the best foundational piece. We focus on training. We focus on core values. We focus on all those things. And that tends to take care of itself. We've had an experience where we've shot a person that was controversial, the Matthew Harrington case way back in 2017. People were paying attention. People were watching. But the reason I think why we didn't have protests that turned violent or those things is because the trust that we built before that. The people watched, they paid attention, they should have been paying attention, and we handled it the best way that we thought. And whatever the outcome was, the outcome was. Some of the problems that I've seen in my time that I'm critical of law enforcement is this sort of presumption that the cops never are wrong. Something happens and there's an immediate defense. We're drawing this sort of bright line of, it can't possibly be that the police made an error or anything like that. And that's been some of the source of conflict between communities and the police departments before. The community doesn't want robots. They recognize it's a hard job. They recognize it's dangerous. They recognize there are risks. And so if you can build trust in advance of those things, when something does happen and they trust that you're going to handle it appropriately, either the officer acted appropriately or they didn't. And if they didn't, you have to handle it appropriately. Those kinds of things help you go a long way to staying out of the limelight. And nobody wants to be on CNN. So
nobody wants to be on CNN. Drones. Does the police department have a drone?
We have 3. We have one really big one and a couple of small ones. They're a very valuable tool. Um, we have used it, a couple, 3 times a year. Pre-raid surveillance, finding lost people, guys hiding in the woods. Lots of value to them, and they're part of the tool bag that we deploy. But yeah, we use drones. We try and use technology a lot to help us balance, our mission. So
It's great. That was kind of a new concept to me. Obviously back when I was there,
right.
we didn't have any drones. Nobody was thinking about drones. So it's
Certainly.
really exciting to see that. Do you think that infringes on people's privacy, or is there a balance there?
There's a list of about 3 or 4 things in my daily life that I concern myself with existentially, and one of which is the balance of security and public safety versus privacy. I feel very strongly about that. There's a lot of tools and technology that exist today that didn't exist back then, but I'm always very reluctant to adopt that because I'm concerned about that. That's one of the challenges that we face moving forward with law enforcement is public safety versus privacy. With AI technology and the things that are out there right now, it's really, really tough to sort of maneuver through that. We want to catch the bad guy and we want to put the bad guy away if they deserve it. But we have to remember, our foundational pieces of the Constitution and people's privacy and security. And so that's a tough balancing act. That's a fair question that we think about a lot.
What about as far as cyber crimes? How much do you guys delve into that realm?
A lot. I have a detective that's assigned to cyber crimes, and that's all she does. And she spends a great deal of her time trying to educate people about the dangers. I think people would really be surprised at how often a person gets taken advantage of when they're out in the social media world with internet scams and that sort of thing. It continues to grow and continues to emerge as something that we deal with a lot. Unfortunately, it's most of the elderly population that get scammed or fall for scams. And so we spend a lot of time trying to educate people about being mindful of that. We try to spend some time. And then, we have resources devoted to just that topic. And she spends quite a bit of her time. She's awful busy.
So you're saying when the person offers you a free iPad or $100,000 and you just got to send them shipping in the amount of half of that,
right?
That's not real.
That's not real. It's once a week. I would tell you, Joe, that someone's coming in and reporting that they thought that this or that happened. Some of it is really sophisticated. Yeah, I think probably everybody's seen the last couple of years, the skimmers at the gas stations and the ATM. I mean, that's tough to combat. But tried and true stuff. If it's too good to be true, it probably is. It's always something our parents taught us that applies today as it applies to them. And I wish more people would pay particular attention to that. It would be much more helpful. We just don't want to see people get sometimes their life savings taken, and it's very, very difficult to undo that. So, start with that. If it's too good to be true, it is. If you're not sure, call us and let us help you. We'll be glad to do that.
We see this a lot. We have a lot of people come in asking for help. In fact, I just sent somebody out to help somebody who may have had an issue. And people are like, what can I do to get my money back? And we always encourage them, report it to law enforcement. I don't think I've ever seen anybody recover anything.
Right.
Short of a bank fraud where the bank maybe covers that. Have you been able to recover anything for anyone? Or your department, rather?
I'm not telling you we haven't. I'm sure that there are examples of, some small stuff, but generally speaking, no. Some of it, a small portion of it is international, right? And so that's very difficult. We have to call in our federal partners, but some of it's local. We've had Craigslist scams where someone offers a car for sale or something like that, and it's a scam, or, marketplace, that kind of stuff. So there's a local element to it. And we've had a little bit of success, but it's really hard to do. And the best way to try and help yourself is avoid that to begin with.
There's a lot of cities that have places where if you decide to purchase something, you can go to a public place and have that done. Do we have anything like that in Leavenworth?
I'm not aware of that. We tinkered around with that for a little while at the Justice Center. But I think there were some liability concerns. And so We're glad to help. If someone calls and says, "Hey, can I meet somewhere?" Yeah, we'll probably stand by if we have time to do that. Sometimes we're a little bit busy, but that's not a bad idea to try and encourage people to do that. It's important to do some things to protect yourself. You can evaluate the person selling it. I mean, that if a person has a Facebook page for 3 days and they're putting this really expensive thing up there, that's probably something you could,
Mhm.
help yourself. But if they've been around for a little while and they've sold a lot of things, just do a little research, you're probably okay. I think we've all done that, right? But
Mhm.
just be a little bit mindful, a little bit cautious, aware of your surroundings. And if it's too good to be true, it probably is.
How much do you guys really pay attention to social media?
Social media, as it relates to law enforcement, theoretically is a good idea, but reality is it's kind of a wasteland out there. We just don't have much success anymore in terms of um, we'll put some information out to the public that we need help with this, that, or the other, and it turns into 125 comments of people arguing back and forth about this,
Mhm.
that, or the other. And so there's some value, but less today than there was when it sort of started. And I wish we were better at that.
What about people's comments, positive or negative? Do you guys give those much
It's mostly for
attention?
entertainment value. I'll be honest with you. We
Mm.
do get the occasional. Well, usually, what happens if we put something out, hey, we need help finding this person or this car, right? Of the 100, there's 4 or 5 people that are genuinely helpful, right? They'll call us though, reach out and say, hey, I think that person is this, or I think that person's car is this, that sort of. So there is some smaller element to it, but mostly it's not. We had a young kid here probably 4 or 5 years ago now, maybe 4 years ago now, the little young girl that got killed up on 4th and Kiowa in the middle of the night. And we found evidence at the crime scene with the car and serial number that gave us the specific car. We knew exactly what kind of car it is and that sort of thing. So we put that information out. Hey, here's the kind of car that we're looking at. And here's some video of that. And there were several hundred comments arguing back and forth about what the car was. I literally went on social media and said, we know what kind of car it is. You guys, please stop arguing. It's a Subaru. I'm telling you, it's a Subaru. We know it's a Subaru. And there was, no, I think it's a Ford Escape. No, I think it's this, that, or the other. So, probably 4 or 5 years ago, that was sort of the final straw. We do put some information out, but it just is not as helpful as it could be in theory. And so it ends up being a little bit difficult.
What about in some of those different focus groups, or I think First City Focus has a page where people just comment on the service they get from the police department?
Sure. I don't think there's many people with the police department that is connected to those groups.
Mm.
We we were all sort of collectively involved in that for a while, but some of the stuff is just purely, vitriol and very little value to that. And so again, theoretically, it's should work better than it does, but that's what ultimately happens is someone had a negative experience with the police department, and no matter what it is that you're talking about, knew something or
Nothing. Yeah.
whatever. So that's a disappointing part. I wish we could be better at that.
Let's shift. I read your report this year. It was interesting.
Right.
Major crimes are down, as I recall, but there are some minor crimes that are up. At the time, you said you really couldn't understand the focus behind it or why that was. Have you given that much thought since then?
And we spend a lot of time looking at the data, sort of studying, trying to get a sense of where, because what we do is we take that, we sort of redeploy, right? We have a lot of this, and so we need to sort of change. This has just been such a really, really odd year. I'm sorry, last year, 2020, was just such an
Sure.
odd year that crime went up, and it was a pretty significant jump. But usually, traditionally, I can point to one or two things. I can point to this and this were the reason why. This year, I think probably the most significant jump was assault. So I think we went from 260 in 23 to 500.
Wow.
So that's a pretty big jump. Probably most of that is associated with domestic violence. Disappointed in that the sort of domestic violence is sort of creeping back up. We were making a little bit of progress. None that is meaningful. We still go to 2 domestic violence cases every 24 hours in the city
Wow.
of Leavenworth. Where that's pretty common though across the country. We just have not cracked the code on domestic violence. All the changes that we made in the 25 or 30 years just really have not diminished it. And I don't I don't know what the answer to that question is. We'll continue to do the things that we do, which is arrest and push for prosecution and try to make some progress that way. We just have not cracked the code culturally from domestic violence. And so that's probably the significant piece. But the rest of it's sort of sprinkled throughout, where some things are down, some things are up. Kind of a very odd year.
The murders we haven't had any murders. Did we have any murders last year?
So we don't use the M word, Joe, out loud. But we had 0 homicides last year.
Okay, homicides.
Which is also an oddity. We normally traditionally have about 1 or 2. And it's, been that way for a while. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down, but 0, it's been a little while since we've had a 0. So that's positive, and let's hope that it stays that way. Although
As I recall, in the Lansing Leadership Chamber class, you said it's roughly every 4 years
that we
experience a homicide like that. Is that accurate?
Or it bumps up?
Yeah.
I think I might have been talking about officer-involved shootings, maybe.
Okay.
That sounds more related to that. About once every 4 or 5 years, we have an officer-involved shooting. But now, traditionally, homicides, we have about 1 or 2 per year. We've already had one this year. I think everybody's familiar with the circumstances of a 3-year-old and so we've made an arrest in that case. And so that would count already. So, that's kind of where we are with that.
One of the things that people talk about a lot, especially as I've gone through this election cycle, is the homeless problem in town. I think you and I have had a couple of conversations about that.
Right.
You feel like it's a mental health issue. I'm sure that people call the police department when they see somebody lying on the side of the road.
Sure.
What's the protocol for that? What do you guys do about that, or what can you do about that?
So the most important part for us dealing with the public who sort of call and reach out for help from the police department about the homeless population is trying to help people understand that the act of homelessness is not illegal. And we've really struggled with that because that's what happens. People call and say, we need you to do something about this person. And it's just not illegal to be homeless. Remember, it has to be about their behavior, right? And so we have 2 alternatives at the police department, one of which is jail and the other which is the hospital, neither of which are equipped to handle and solve the homeless population issue either, right? So that's been the frustration. Now, in the last 4 or 5 years, we've been able, I think, collectively, police, the hospitals, the judges, and the mental health teams have all been able to convince the politicians, the elected officials, that the resources that we have are not sufficient. So we need to focus on that. And that has been sort of a sea change these last few years. So it is substantially better today than it was 4 or 5 years ago. Homelessness has probably half a dozen elements to it. Economic issues, social issues, substance abuse, mental health, all of those things contribute to why a person would be out on the street. I would argue, based on my experiences and the data that we have, that I would say 6 out of 10 of those people are not homeless by choice. They've been diagnosed with a severe mental illness. And we've had experiences with people that are walking around with no clothes on downtown, and we've had where they stole an American flag off the school board building and are walking around with it. That's the only, that person is not capable of functioning in society. So the next sort of step towards homelessness and the final solution, which is the most difficult, complicated place, is that person needs to be somewhere. Not necessarily institutionalized, but they should have been somewhere in a hospital. If we can get over that obstacle, and if we can find the solutions to that I think is going to solve some of it, half of it, something like that. Certainly there are people out there that are homeless by choice. They're just not going to, follow the cultural norms and find a place to live. And so those we have a little bit better approach with. We typically, so if someone says, hey, Chief, there's a homeless camp somewhere, right? So typically what we'll do is we'll go out, we'll have an interaction with them. We'll say, hey, we've got some complaints and we're going to close the camp. We give them some period of time. It's not defined anywhere, but it's usually about a week or so where we say, hey, everyone, Here in about a week or so, we're going to come back. You guys gather up your stuff and move along, go somewhere else. You can't stay here. We give them some period of time, and then ultimately we go back up there. And then if we need to, we'll make an arrest. If not, the city services will come help us clean up the place. And so that's generally the way that we approach it. An individual person depends on the circumstances. If a person is laying on the sidewalk downtown, that's a public place, and that's not illegal to lay there on the sidewalk. Now we'll check their welfare, right? If they're impaired, or they're mentally ill, that sort of thing, we can sort of try and deal with it that way. And we have some tools to do that, but it really depends on the individual circumstances. The police in and of itself are not capable of solving the homeless problem. It is a cultural problem that we're all going to have to weigh in and participate in for us to make some considered progress.
What about, I spoke to someone one day and they said, well, if we didn't have the homeless shelter,
Right.
we wouldn't have the homeless problem.
Sure.
That's obviously, in my mind, not accurate.
Right.
What are your thoughts there?
So many, many years ago, when we were together on the road, when I started here in 1990, there was a homeless guy that slept on the bench at 7th and Cherokee all night. That's where he slept. And, but that was it. Between then and now, the problem has grown pretty substantially in terms of, I would tell you today in the city of Leavenworth, just based on the data that we have, there's probably 15 people that are chronically homeless, that suffer with some sort of mental illness and substance abuse issue that cause most of the attention that we get. And there are other categories of people that are, yes, sometimes they're homeless, but they're bouncing around, sleeping on friends' couches, those kinds of things. Whether or not we have a homeless shelter in town or don't have one in town, there's going to be homeless people. Whether or not there's more or less because of the homeless shelter is a fair question. And we've been trying to evaluate that, started to collect specific data about homeless people in the city of Leavenworth. And I don't know the answer to that question yet. It's a fair question, but I don't know that it's definitive. We are going to have homeless people in the city of Leavenworth, whether there's a shelter or not. The question is whether that adds to it or not. There have been examples where a person came here and were not from town and stayed here. Miranda, when she was up there, if they weren't from Leavenworth, they got 24 hours and then she gave them a bus ticket and sent them back to wherever they came from. And so we're evaluating that. And I don't know that it would be prudent today to go, I am absolutely sure that that's the answer to the question. So we're still trying to sort through that.
What responsibility do you think the city has in the homeless issue?
Well, I don't know that the city has any more responsibility or obligation than we're doing now alone, right? That's typically what happens in this discussion is the city needs to do something, or the county needs to do something, or the state needs to do something, or the police or whatever. We all are going to have a role in solving the homelessness issue. Where the city might have a role, whether or not elected officials will want to do that, is the issue of affordable housing, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a question for people that are smarter than me and not my area of expertise, but I hear that a lot. Affordable housing is contributing to the issue. Rent is contributing to the issue. The economy is contributing to the issue. And so to the extent people think the city have a role in that, they might. But that's always a question of funding and resources and whether or not, we can afford to do that.
Does community policing help in this situation? And I think we kind of talked about, when I came to visit, we talked about community policing. I think you said you would love to do it. You are short some officers. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So community policing, sort of in the broadest possible sense, is really less about a particular group of officers going out to do something than it is really philosophical, right? It's about relationships. We all sort of live in a small town. We all know each other. If there's a problem at the school, we talk. If there's a problem with the businesses, we can talk because we all know each other. The ability so for example, if we had a enormous homeless problem and I wanted to start a unit and their entire mission was to go out and sort of combat homelessness, that is the area where we have difficulty and we have challenges in terms of staffing. Because it's not just homelessness, it's domestic violence. There's a fair argument to be made that we could establish a unit that does domestic violence or fentanyl or one of the other half dozen really significant issues. That is where staffing and resources come into play, where we struggle to do that. This offense versus defense, right? We're answering the 911 phone calls. We're providing public safety. We're doing all those things. Here's a particular problem that we need more resources. That's generally where we're struggling a lot in terms of staffing. But everybody is. The sheriff's department, the police departments all over the country are.
One of the things that we hear a lot is that Leavenworth City, Leavenworth County is a training ground for Johnson County officers. And basically they come here, they get certified, they get some training, and they just move on to bigger paydays. Is that accurate?
So that sort of ebbs and flows. 5 years ago, the Leavenworth Police Department averaged about 3 openings, and occasionally we had people leave to go to different agencies, some of which were Johnson County, some of which were not. Today, we are experiencing that a lot more than we have. Most recently, we had an officer leave here to go to a Johnson County agency as a starting patrol officer. He got a salary of $102,000.
Wow.
That officer had been here for 6 years and had some specific training skills that I think they were probably looking for. But that is no different than down there. If you're this police department in Johnson County, you're paying $102,000. Why are people leaving there? You would think there wouldn't ever be any openings because that's an awful lot of money.
Sure.
But there are, right? There are openings down there. So they're leaving to go somewhere else. And it sort of makes the competition really, really difficult. If you're paying that amount of money and people are still leaving and there are openings, it's across the entire spectrum of law enforcement. The competition is lethal. It's basic economic stuff. Supply and demand. The supply is really low. The demand is really high. The price goes up, and we're all in the same boat. We're competing against each other for a relatively small pool of people to come into the profession or stay in the profession. And, we just have to do the best we can.
You think we have less people applying to be police officers these days?
By tenfold. I remember when I applied in 1990, there were so many people. We had 2 different days of testing. It was so big. Today, we're lucky if we have a process that starts where 5 people apply and show up. Generally, nothing's changed. It takes 25 candidates to get 1 qualified, acceptable candidate for the position of police officer. It hadn't changed in the many years that I've been here. And so we're not seeing that, or nobody is seeing that. It's just less people entering the profession. But it's also affecting teachers, firefighters, nurses, all of that sort of group that fall into that category are all affected by the same thing. Competition is lethal, supply is low, demand is high, and so the price goes up.
Do you think those people are just going into different professions? They don't want to do the hard manual labor of being in law enforcement, firefighting, or?
No, I don't think that. I think it's really about generational changes. The people in our generation sort of went to one place, stayed, did their retirement, and sailed off into the sunset. This group of younger people is much more willing to say, yeah, I've spent 5 years, but I'm going to go somewhere else. I think the grass is greener, right, wrong, or otherwise. They're more willing to do that this generation. And, economic pressures do apply. You can't hardly blame someone for leaving to make a $20,000 or $30,000 pay raise to do the same job. So, you can't blame them for that, but I think that's just generational. People are more willing to just move and go do something different, go do the same thing in a different place.
What do you think people misunderstand most about law enforcement?
Probably that. I think probably. I always wish that the public got to see the cops behind the scenes, not out on the road in the midst of. And from the citizen's perspective, most of the time it's a very negative connotation, right? It's you're at the house because there's a domestic, or we're pulling you over because it's a traffic stop, or something bad has happened. That's why the cops are there. I wish that the general public got to see the cops sort of behind the scenes a little bit when they're relaxed a little bit and it's not such a negative connotation. Most of the people, I think you would find that cops are really, really good people. They really love what they're doing. They really are trying to help. They really are trying to provide for your safety. It's a tough job. And so I wish people got to see that a little bit more often. And so we try to do that in the profession of get out there and engage with people in a non-enforcement or non-call situation so that they could see, what good people they are. That's what I wish.
You do have some events like that. I think I've seen Coffee with Cops.
Right.
Can you name any of the other events that people, if they wanted to, could see officers in that situation?
So we do, Coffee with a Cop. We do Touch a Truck. We do, sometimes they'll have events, specific, like a particular church will have an event and they'll ask an officer to come, or, trick or treat thing that happens at Havens, that kind of, sometimes we participate in that. So we do try very, very hard to be out in an engagement capacity is really what we call it. And so there's plenty of times for people to do that. We encourage people come down and do tours all the time. We have Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts and classes from schools that take a tour. And so we recognize the value in that and work hard to try and do that.
How often do people come down and say they want to go on a ride along?
Maybe once a month now. Maybe once a month we'll get somebody that calls up and says, we want to come do a ride along, and we let folks do that for about 4 hours, kind of get a feel for what the environment is. It's less today than it was 10 or 15 years ago. There's a lot of cop shows. People get it from the TV. They know, what happens out there, all the, whatever, Cop Live or whatever that was, and then Cops, that sort of thing. So once in a while we get somebody.
What do you think is your biggest success over the last few years?
I place a tremendous amount of value on, two things: leadership and training. The people that we have in leadership roles at the Leavenworth Police Department today are so incredible and so fantastic that they're such a good group. They are concerned about their people. They take care of their people. They work hard to make sure they're doing the right thing. And so that's the one thing that I value the most, and the most effort we've made in the course of the last 10 or so years is really emphasizing leadership and training and the right people in the right spots. And I feel really, really good about that.
Cops today are a little bit different than when we were coming up. If we had issues, nobody talked about mental health. It was a bad word.
Right.
We rub a little dirt on it, move on.
Right.
There was no PTSD, or at least we didn't talk about it.
Right.
Cops today are a little more sensitive to that. How is that different, managing those types of newer generation officers where they may be a little more sensitive?
Quite honestly, this generation is significantly better at than we were. We should have been doing that all along. Some of the things that we saw, they still see today. They are less concerned about perception of weakness or being soft or any of those things. And we should have been doing that all along. And so I prefer that. Yes, they are more sensitive, and yes, they are, but we should have been. You can only go to so many calls in which people die, and they die in a terrible manner, or there's a crime, or there's a shooting, or something like that. We should have been doing that all along. This generation is much better at that. And the value is that they're not angry, and they're not pissed off, and they're not making decisions from that place, right? They know there's a problem. They get it talked about. They go to therapy. They take advantage of EAP. They do those things. And so when they do come to work, they're in a better frame, better frame of mind. And so they're making better decisions out there. We should have been doing that all along.
That's great. Okay. We're going to kind of switch and go a little bit lighter here. I've got some 10 rapid fire questions.
Okay. I'm ready. Rapid fire.
I don't usually go through all 10, but I'm excited to hear your answers on all 10 of these.
Got it.
All right. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
How many times a day?
Like 6 in the morning.
Early riser or night owl?
Early riser.
Favorite place to eat in Leavenworth?
Toriato's.
Oh, nice call. Good call. I give a shout out to Toriato's right now. It was a good call. One book everyone should read.
Rogue Warrior by Richard Marchenko. He is the guy that started SEAL Team 6.
Okay, good. First job you ever had before law enforcement?
The Skyview Supper Club in Leavenworth. I was a dishwasher at the age of like 15.
Wow, Skyview, man. I haven't heard that long
Where
time.
everybody went for prom, right?
That's right.
Right.
That's right. So many people miss out on that
I
now.
know,
huh?
right?
Favorite way to unwind after a long day?
So one of two things: sports shows. I come home and I listen to sports talk show all the time, or listen to '80s classic rock, which is the greatest generation of music ever. The rest of this stuff is terrible,
Dare I ask what band?
like Journey or Bon Jovi,
Okay.
Def Leppard. Come on, Joe.
All right. All right. I hear you. Most memorable moment in your career as a police officer?
Oh boy, that's a tough one.
There's probably been a lot.
The most memorable one that haunts me still is the Jazzy Watkins murder case. An 8-year-old girl got raped and murdered up on Ottawa Street when I was a detective, and
What year is that?
1995 or something like that.
Wow.
We caught the guy, but he sort of got found guilty for one of the crimes at trial, and that was partially my fault because I was a young, stupid detective. I should have known better, and so that one worries me and bothers me a lot.
Okay. If you weren't in law enforcement, what would you be doing?
A zookeeper. I'm fascinated by that show, like behind the scenes where they take care of the giraffes and all that stuff. I like animals more than I like people. So I'd be a zookeeper, Joe.
One thing most people don't know about you.
I'm adorable, Joe. They think I'm mean sometimes, and I'm not. I'm sweet and adorable.
Would your staff say that about you?
They better, or they'll be in trouble. No, I'm kidding.
Best piece of advice you've ever been given?
My father said to me, boy, there's a reason why God gave you 2 ears. One's for listening and the other's for paying attention.
I like it. Pat, thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Joe.
I appreciate you, my friend.
All right. Thank you very much, Joe. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Pat Chief Kitchens, Leavenworth Police Department. I tell you what, stop by and talk to him sometime. He's always happy to listen.